International relations became a discipline after the Westphalian Model set in 1648. Yet, there is evidence that during ancient times there were other events that can be associated with what we consider to be part of contemporary international relations. The Mesopotamian City-States and some of the empires that came directly after them are a perfect example of those events that can be understood as the beginning of a era. Some of you may ask why. The answer is simple, because this is when we start seeing communities coming together and reacting to other foreign powers. They recognize that there are other city-states with different rules, customs, and that they could be a threat, but they can also be a peaceful neighbor. The focus of this video will be on the Sumerian City-States, more specifically to what were the cornerstones of international relations during those times, treaties and diplomacy that can be merged in war and trade. But first, what are the city-states? The city-states are generally considered to be on the second wave of international relations 5,500 years ago. All of them were more military, political, and more centralized. Their structures were based on institution as a result of the process of urbanization. They also political autonomy. Let us go to the good old days of the year 3500, when the growth of cities like Uruk started, forming part of the Sumerian city-states. Those cities were all prominent adobe temples. From the year 3000, there were found some pictographic things written in the Sumerian language, which led to the conclusion that the language spoken there was the Sumerian language. Who would have thought that? Moving on, around the year 2700, Gilgamesh may have been the royal king of Uruk. He became the hero of later stories and is said to have built the city of walls. Later, in 2500, was found the first written account of the war. In 2400, the writing changed as it became cuneiform, Mesopotamian wedge-shaped writing. In 2300, Sargon of Akkad, united the Sumerian city-states, which produced a radical change for them. By 2200, the Akkad Empire expanded and declined. Because of this, in the year 200-100, Ur, a city in the southern Mesopotamia on the river Euphrates, became the capital of an empire when King Ur-Nammu conquered southern Mesopotamia and territories further east. However, in 2000, Ur was destroyed by Elamites and Amorites. As a result of this, the Sumerian language started receding, yet the Akkadian became the main spoken and written language. It was a similar language to modern Arabic and Hebrew, written also using cuneiform. In 100-800, another big event came as King Hammurabi unified all the Sumerian cities with the capital at Babylon. Finally, from 1700 to 100, many Sumerian traditions continued in Babylonia. Sumerian language was no longer spoken but written for some religious inscriptions.
Okay, let's start with something not so fun first. Diplomacy is an old practice, and one that allows modern states to interact with each other, and to find a reason to not start World War III. But the Sumerian states, and the Sumerian dynasties, also engaged in diplomacy with their neighbors, because they also realized that reaching an agreement was better than a war. Sometimes. As a matter of fact, the third dynasty of Ur had a department specifically for foreign relations. The department had a Secretary of State and a Foreign Service. The Foreign Service consisted of diplomats and emissaries, and they would travel to other kingdoms, naturally. Now, the way diplomacy worked then is different from how it works today in modern times, but there are some details that still remained. For example, it is very possible that diplomats were given temporary residence during their stay in the dynasty of Ur III. However, there were also customs and rules, and the breaking of these would not be very wise. As an example, it is implied in the Amarna letters that 2 Babylonian diplomats angered the Pharaoh king, which is not a very wise move because Egypt was considered a superpower. And I'm pretty sure that that move was not very well received by the Egyptian authorities, and it most likely simultaneously pissed and scared the Babylonian king. You know, that is not very different from modern times. Let's talk about something fun. War! War may be humanity's favorite hobby. It has always been waged, it will always be waged. There is no escaping it. So imagine my joy when I learned that the Sumerian city-states did the same. One of these wars was between the city of Lagash and the state of Umma. It was a border dispute. The two states came together in an arrangement to settle the border. A stone marked the border. Now, you may think that neither party was going to respect the treaty. There is nobody that enforces the treaty or that makes it binding, right? Well, the Sumerian gods disagree. Both parties swore an oath to the gods, and if the treaty was to be broken, the violators would be punished by the gods. Hence, the gods became the guarantors of the treaty. This goes to show that there was a common understanding of an international set of norms between the states, a proto-international law. But If you must know of a more physical guarantor, then that role most probably belonged to the king of Kish, Mesopotamian. He was a person believed to have placed a stone, and who also played a role in another treaty between the city-states. Now, it is very likely that the Stone Border Treaty and the following treaty that I'm gonna mention are one and the same, or that they came from the same set of circumstances. As you know, the cities, the Sumerian city-states, were located between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. Very important rivers to this area of the world because rains are not abundant, so the city-states relied on the delta of the rivers in order to thrive through their agriculture and, as a follow-up, their economy. So the treaty was a crop sharing agreement for a portion of boundary land that was cultivated by Umma under a lease. However, the city of Umma decided not to pay. Genius move. And as a result, conflict erupted and caused the destruction of a part of the canal. By the way, the Tigris rivers had a lot of canals which they used as an irrigation system. Oops, forgot to mention that part. This might as well have been the first war in history, and it was fought by water. As luck would have it, Umma lost the war, and after the war, the city of Umma and Lagash decided to go to the city of Kish, to the king, and that's how they came to the agreement. The treaty was made under the arbitration of Mesopotamian, the king of Kish, and through this agreement, Kish prohibited the encroachment of the city of Lagash, Umma, and its territories.
Who does not like money? Everywhere you go, you will find some sort of monetary currency or objects with value. And that is where trade and the basis of a bartered economy comes from. Trade was strongly established with foreign lands at the time of the cities like Uruk, and that did evolve from pictographs to cuneiform writing. It is believed that commerce was the major driving force in the development of writing, as there now had to be some means of accurate long-distance communications between the merchants of Sumeria and their agents abroad. Gulf trade was a material connection between the regions and perhaps a device by which emerging conditions in one region affected the others. However, commerce, both maritime and land-based, was not the only area of interaction between these and other regions of West India. Mesopotamia's arrangement with the eastern lands also involved a variety of diplomatic exchanges, elite marriages, cultural hegemony, political patronage, and wars. Together with trade, all these activities defined the center-periphery relations. Products of the Gulf trade included metals, textiles, semi-precious stones, ivory, wood, and reeds, cereals, oleaceous vegetables, and other species, oil, ointments, resins, shells, and possibly pearls, and a small variety of finished wood, metal, or stones commodities. The Mesopotamian city-states had violent relations with the neighboring states, and as a consequence of that, it structured trans-regional relations by domination. Trade itself was often an aspect of diplomacy. It was the substitute of violence. Furthermore, trade simply as economic transaction was embedded in elite competition power, and the systemic consequences of trade were affected by the political activation commodities in that competition. In other words, wars were waged due to money, and money also prevented wars. Nothing really changed. And finally, the conclusion. The beginning of international relations can be stabilized in the era of the Mesopotamian city-states, as this project has shown in a very totally original form which no one else has ever done. War, diplomacy, and trade are the topics that have demonstrated the evidence of the origin of international relations, certainly before the Westphalian Model. Thank you for watching the video. Hope you have enjoyed and learned something.